Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian. I'm here today at the Rock Island Auction House looking at some of the guns in their upcoming April of 2016 premiere auction. And today I have in front of me an interesting Japanese World War II handgun. Now, most of the weapons used by the Japanese during World War II were manufactured by state arsenals. They were actually pretty protective of that. The Japanese military was a bit jealous of any potential civilian concerns getting into the military arms industry. They didn't really want it. And the Hamada here is one of the few exceptions to that. So basically what had happened was the Hamada gun shop was a custom gunsmithing, gun building shop. It was opened in 1895, and they catered to sportsmen in Japan. They would manufacture shotguns and custom rifles, they would do gunsmithing, and I'm sure they sold a fair number of imported guns of all other brands as well. In 1901, Mr. Hamada Sr. Had a son named Bunji Hamada, and he became an active partner in the gun shop as he grew up. By 1940, well, by the time World War II started off, he was actively managing the shop. So this became a pretty significant manufacturing concern. By 1941, they had 150 employees located in Tokyo, and they had at least 80 manufacturing tools, so things like mills and lathes. That's a substantial facility. And in 1941, the war was, well, of course, the United States entered World War II against Japan. This became, for Japan, a global conflict rather than just a war against China. And at that point, the Japanese government stepped in and basically dictated that the Hamada gun shop would cease production of civilian commercial guns, and they would start producing firearms for the military. I suspect they were one of the very few large enough scale manufacturing facilities or gun manufacturing facilities in Japan that could actually be effectively moved into military production. So at that point, Bunji Hamada starts looking at what he can manufacture for the military, and the natural solution appears to be a pistol. The Japanese need handguns for guards and for officers and that sort of thing. A lot of these guns were actually supplied as commercial foreign pistol purchases that maybe had come into Japan before the war. The Nambu pistols were expensive to manufacture. The Type 14 in particular was a complex and expensive gun. And for example, that was a locked breech gun. The Japanese didn't really need that. They were perfectly happy to use blowback 32 automatic pistols. So that's what Bunji Hamada designed. His gun looks pretty similar to a Browning 1910, both visually and mechanically. It's one of the really cool things about this story is that Hamada himself was still alive in the 1980s, and he actually was interviewed by a number of authors of books about Japanese firearms, guys like Fred Honeycutt and Harry Derby. And his story was actually able to be preserved thanks to those authors and their books. So because they were asking him in person, we know a lot about what was going on. At any rate, what he claimed was that he didn't actually copy the Browning 1910, and I think that's probably true. What he did, he said he was familiar with handguns in general, and he just kind of drew up a design for one that made sense and could be manufactured. And there are definitely elements to this that have nothing to do with the Browning pistol. And, you know, by the 1940s, Browning's patents are no longer in force, and he had come up with really one of the simplest and most effective ways to build a small blowback handgun. And it should be no surprise that a lot of people trying to make efficient blowback pistols came up with designs that were very similar to Browning's. So that's where the design came from. Anyway, Bunji Hamada designs this pistol, makes up some prototypes, sends them to the Japanese military. They're approved and adopted in fairly short order, and he's given a contract to make them. And between 1941 and 1944, he would produce, or he and his shop, factory is really a better term than shop, they'd produce between 4,500 and 5,000 of these pistols. So really a fairly substantial number for a civilian gun shop pressed into military service. Now what's interesting is very few of these guns are known to exist in the United States. Something like 27, maybe 30 total. And And what's even more interesting is they are all in a fairly narrow serial number range. So all the ones that are known, well, in the US and in Europe, are between basically serial number 2200 and 3000. What Hamada said was that most of these pistols, or all of these pistols actually, were sent to mainland China. They were equipping Japanese forces there. And what most likely happened was a batch of these guns, probably 1,000 of them, or close to that, went to some particular unit that was then rerouted to islands in the Pacific where they found themselves fighting American soldiers. And that's how the guns came back into the United States, the ones that did, was by being captured on Pacific Island, in Pacific Island combat zones by American troops. So that would explain why we have just this odd, narrow serial number range in the middle of the overall production. Apparently, according to Hamada, there are a lot of these guns in China, but we don't really have a good access to firearms in China, and hopefully the internet will help bring a lot of this information out, but as of now, we don't really know what sort of Japanese firearms are floating around in China still. So it would make sense that a lot more of them survive over there, because a lot more of them were sent there than ended up in places where they could be acquired by American soldiers. Anyway, I said that this isn't exactly like a Browning, although it's similar. Why don't we take a closer look at it, because we can pull this apart and see how it all works. I think I mentioned this already, but in case I didn't, this is chambered for the 32 ACP cartridge, 7.65 Browning. Magazine capacity is 9 rounds. We have a heel release down here. Pull the magazine out. The base of the magazine here is marked 7.65 millimeter, and it has this large oval with cross inside. That is the Hamada factory symbol. So that was added to both the guns and the magazines. So over the course of production of these guns, there were actually quite a few very small changes made. 7 in particular have been documented amongst the guns known in the US and Europe, which are, by the way, almost all of them in the US. So these changes include the slide serrations. There were originally 7, which was then reduced to 6. They didn't change the spacing or anything, they just took the last one and stopped putting it in. The frame serial number was initially on the right side of the pistol, which would be here, and it was then moved to the back strap right there. The grip design was changed, although I don't have an example of the early style of grip to show you. This pistol, by the way, is late enough that it shows almost all late markings, or late variations. So the die used to make the serial numbers was changed during production. It was originally a fairly small and fine font, and it was changed to this larger and somewhat blockier style. Now, this number appears to be an overstamp. It looks like it was originally, I think, 2750 something. We can see that it was overstamped here on the back strap as well. The internal parts do have the same serial number as the final, the top stamp here, and the internal parts don't appear to be overstamped. I have no idea what the story is behind that, except that it does appear to have been done at the factory. This arrow stamp, it's kind of funny. One of the sides broke off of it, and it was replaced a little bit later after this particular serial number was made. That's kind of an indication of when the guns may have been manufactured. The earlier production Hamadas also have a big set of slide markings up here that basically said Hamada Gun Company, Tokyo, Japan, Hamada type automatic pistol, 7.65 millimeter. A whole bunch of characters up here. And at some point in production, they just stopped doing that. They got rid of them. Now this is an interesting mark. This is a recessed circle in the slide, and there's a cherry blossom stamp inside it. That's actually really cool on this one. That cherry blossom stamp is a mark of final acceptance of the pistol, that it was test fired and checked out and approved and accepted. And early on, all of the guns were approved that way. And as the war moved on, and this pistol was made in 1943, as the war picked up, they stopped bothering to do that on all the guns and just did it on a random selection of them. Now they always milled the circle here, but only the inspected guns actually got a stamp. So as this is a somewhat later gun, it's really cool that it actually happens to be one that was randomly chosen to actually be test fired and checked out and approved at the factory. One of the ways, well, An easy way we know that this was made in 1943 is that it's actually date stamped back here. This is marking for the Tokyo factory where these were made, and that 18 indicates Showa 18, the 18th year of the current imperial dynasty, which would be 1943. All right, now to take this apart is fairly simple. This is a fixed barrel pistol, like I said, straight blowback. There is a disassembly plate here at the back of the slide and a little teeny catch underneath it. So what I'm going to do is pull that catch forward, like that, and then I can pull this disassembly plate down. Now I pull the slide back until these two arrows line up with each other, and then the slide pulls right off the top of the gun. One detail here is this is a striker-fired pistol, and the striker spring is not held in place by anything once you take the slide off. So I'm going to keep my finger back here to keep the striker spring from flying across the room when I take this apart. So, sorry, I should point out at first, this is the manual thumb safety. It is up, which is set to safe. That is fire. This character means safe. So if you can see it, the safety is on. Can't see it, safety is off. Now I can pull the slide back to right there. I'm going to pull it off the top of the gun like this, and out it comes. Pull our mainspring out, and now there's our striker spring. So quick run through of some of the internals. We have our striker here. That's the striker itself with its firing pin tip, and then we have the striker spring and its guide rod at the back. That all slides into this channel where it gets pulled back by the sear, held until you pull the trigger, then released to go forward. Like many other fixed barrel pistols, like the Browning 1910, the recoil spring sits over the barrel inside the slide, and there's a step in the very front of the slide here. You can see it being shiny and reflective. That step holds the recoil spring in place, but the barrel is small enough to go through, come out the front. That's what allows the slide to move. Now, looking at the rest of the pistol, we have, let's start with the barrel. On Browning pistols, for example, the barrel is often affixed by an interrupted thread, so you can rotate the barrel and pull it off. In the case of the Hamada, it's actually in a rotational dovetail. So what I'm going to do is crank this 90 degrees clockwise, like this, and then the barrel comes out. You can see we have this dovetailed section, dovetailed lug on the bottom of the barrel, which sits right in there and rotates to lock in place. Clever. You know, this is an element, for example, that is totally different from Browning, and a creative solution by Hamada. Remember, I mentioned that the serial number on the internal parts matched the final stamp on the outside without any sign of overstamping. So there it is, 522, or 822. Yeah, the final stamp on the outside is 2822. So there's our barrel. Now we can also take a look at the firing mechanism. This yoke is connected to the trigger. That's your sear. So basically, when I pull the trigger, this drops down. When it does that, it's no longer holding the striker back, so the striker goes forward, hits a cartridge, and fires it. And then this tail right here drops when the slide hits it. So when the slide recoils, when I pull the trigger, this goes up. This is our semi-auto disconnector, and the slide then hits it, pushes it down. You can see it interfacing with the sear right there. So when that gets pushed down, the sear pops up, which means it will hold onto the striker once the pistol slide cycles. That prevents it from firing again until I release the trigger, at which point it comes up to here again and allows me to pull the sear down. So that's how the fire control mechanism works. The safety is simply a round dowel, and it's got a cutout in it right behind the sear, so that when the safety is on, the sear hits the safety bar when you pull the trigger. When the safety is off, now there's a cutout behind the sear, which allows it to go back. Reassembly is simple. It's just the reverse of the disassembly. I will point out, if you happen to be taking one of these apart, The reassembly is kind of a three-handed process because you actually have to hold the striker guide rod down about an inch inside the slide. You have to hold it down to this position, roughly, in order to reassemble the slide. So if you're taking one apart, be aware of that. Other than that, it's a very simple process. So thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. This is a really excellent condition Hamada, and you know what? There are very few of these guns out there to begin with, just a couple dozen of them. So a really cool addition to any advanced Japanese firearms collection. If you'd be interested in adding this to your own collection, take a look at the link in the description text below. That'll take you to Rock Island's catalog page about it. See their pictures, see their description, and place a bid right there online if you're so inclined. Thanks for watching.